Hello and welcome to the first ever Makers Hollow podcast. I will be your host for today, Ryan Price, as my computer plays a notification sound. That's what happens when you work while you're working. And this is going to be an interesting, fun romp through the world of creative stuff and making. And we're going to get a little bit more of an intro about what this is all about with our, I don't know, if I'm the host, then you're the star. How do
I
you
guess
want to say
so.
that? You're the person driving this whole thing. It is my older brother, Mr. Stefan Price, joining
Hello.
us from, as it says in giant letters at the bottom of
Giant
the
letters.
screen, Winter Garden, Florida, right across the street from ye old Makers Hollow. Welcome to the
Yes,
podcast.
so we're just doing this as an initial test, short kind of experiment in how to do podcasts. We've watched enough of them. You've made certainly a couple, but I have only been a guest appearance on a few, so never been involved with actually having to structure it and run it and all those different things. So this is the first step in a 1,000 mile journey, right? Um,
Yes, 1,000 mile journey in which you travel 1,000 miles with your mind.
that's right. So we're going to do this experimentation as a video cast, and then we'll see about how to eventually make it as audio podcast, so that way it can be viewed and it can be listened to in different formats. And we're going to talk about Maker Solo. We're going to talk about making. We're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about growing tomatoes and blueberries, and we're going to talk about how to set up a shop space. We're going to talk about all different kinds of things that have to do with making and the maker movement and being a professional artist, being a hobbyist artist, being an aspiring maker, being an actual professional everyday maker. My experience is being an everyday maker. My job is I run a company called Roundtable Productions, and we do props, sets, special effects, scenic, custom fabrication, mechanical effects, atmospheric effects. We build the weird stuff. A lot of our work is for the theme parks. We build stuff for Disney and Universal and other themed attractions. And then a lot of my career has been working in the film and entertainment industry, building things for movies, commercials, TV shows, music videos, and the same kind of stuff that I mentioned: props, sets, mechanical effects, puppets and animatronics, odd and unusual things that they know that they need someone to build, and they don't necessarily fall under any one specific category. That's the kind of stuff I like to do. Um,
Okay, so I'm
and
gonna I'm gonna stop you right there because I think we'll get
sure.
so more of your story in a minute. But let's also
Well, yeah,
talk
that
about what your what your story was of how did you decide that you wanted to open up your workspace to other people, right? It started out that
right.
I know you were working in a warehouse down the street and you were renting from someone that you were sort of working on other jobs with. And then this opportunity came up, this property. You were riding your bike by one day and you went up and talked to
Yep.
the family that owned the property. So do you want to start there?
That's mostly accurate. So in my industry, in the themed entertainment and film special effects industry, so many people float around from job to job, from shop to shop. And some shops are really great to work in and encourage people to work on their own projects in their off time. And I really liked working at those places. And so naturally, what kind of gets born out of a lot of situations is that companies take in artists and they kind of encourage them to work on their own projects. Some people say, "Hey, I've got a job. Can I use the table saw after hours or something like that?"
Yeah.
Sometimes it's encouraged. Sometimes it's just a natural flow of how projects work. And I always liked collaborative shops. And I was starting out and in the industry 23, 24 years ago. And I was encouraged to come in and just, play in the shop whenever I kind of felt like it, as long as I was respectful of the space. So it's sort of always been a natural thing. And I named my company Roundtable Productions because I liked the collaborative effort of artists and craftspeople coming together, working on a project, in that kind of, Arthurian sort of inspirational way. And as we started to look at, we want to set up our own shop. Like you said, I was renting space in a warehouse where there was a larger company that was renting out the whole space, and I was renting space from them. And there was another group of guys who worked for that company who also had their little CNC shop off to the side. So it kind of organically occurred that way at that shop. And then when I had the chance to buy my little collection of warehouses, and then as we sort of added, buying up the rest of the warehouses on this little block in Winter Garden, uh, my wife and I realized that we had this amazing resource of space, and we had all these different artists, and rather than say, well, let's just let it organically turn into a kind of a community of artists working together, we realized after a couple of years, like, what if we made that our everyday business model? What if that is what we aspired to, was to build a space where different artists and crafters and makers could come together and have access to the resource that is one of the toughest ones to come across a lot of times for small business, especially independent artists, is space. Tools, certainly, space, and then also that sense of community that you get in these maker spaces that have sprung up all over across the country, that again allow for people to work collaboratively, support each other, whether it's like, hey, I got something really heavy to lift and it takes two people and I'm only one person. Having someone else around, that's something that as simple as like, I just need to lift a heavy thing, you know to Kate, can I borrow a tool? Or, oh, do you know how to do this? Could you teach me a skill? Or, hey, I've got this really great job, I'd like to subcontract part of this job, or I'd like to team up collaboratively with you, and bid on this project together. All of those things are starting to happen at Makers Hollow, which is exactly why we set up Makers Hollow the way we wanted to. We wanted to rethink how we thought of the entire space, this collection of small buildings on a little block in Winter Garden, about 30,000 square feet of space altogether, roughly, and on about 3 to 4 acres. We said, what if we could just make this into a space that encourages that kind of, operation day to day, and it encourages people to have more agency over their work because they're not burdened by this tremendous amount of overhead cost. And it's kind of a co-working space, but a lot of co-working spaces, when you think of co-working spaces, most people think of like a series of office desks and maybe a little coffee shop or something like
Right.
that in a downtown area. And so there's not a lot of co-working spaces where you can make some noise, make dust, work with things that you really wouldn't be able to do in an office space.
Well, and
Laser
where you
cutters and
use
sanders and
right,
things.
where you use a product that says use in a well ventilated
Well
area.
ventilated area. That's a huge one. Well ventilated area. A lot of the stuff that we do, you need a well ventilated space. And we had collected these warehouses to use as our workshop for making all the different kind of unusual things that we make at Roundtable. And we just said, this needs to be the way that we operate. This is the best expression of our values to champion them in a successful, capitalist economic system. How do we make this work? Because maker spaces are typically nonprofit spaces, and those are great. They're in libraries, they're in schools, they're independent spaces that are nonprofit organizations
Well,
that give
and they're
people
kind of
access to
like
all of those things.
there's a lot of maker spaces in that model too, where it's sort of like a group of, it could be 2 to 10 people comes together and they say, we have this common need, we're going to try to find a landlord who understands this model, right? And they
Right.
go through this challenge, or they in Orlando, the Family Lab started by renting a storage unit, and eventually they found that landlord who was willing to give them a lease. And that person, I think they also have like a, they're part of like the local innovation council or something like that, right? So like
Yeah,
you have to
there's like
find
kind of
somebody
other
who's got resources that's also sympathetic to your mission. And in your
either. And
case,
in our case, I've got skin in the game,
right.
so like, this is my workshop, this is my life that I live on a daily basis. I'm not just some investor that owns a warehouse. I'm an active participant. I'm not just the president, I'm a user. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a member, or whatever the
Right.
line is. So, Makers Hollow, we were looking for a name that kind of encapsulated the kind of aesthetic that we were going for. We wanted to build a space that that encourage this maker movement, like I said, in this collaborativeness, and we wanted to kind of encourage the fact that we're kind of a little bit more outside of the normal system, a little bit more whimsical. So we thought the name Makers Hollow kind of encapsulated that for us, because it's this green space. We're not in some industrial park. We have a collection of warehouses. Some of them are left over from an agricultural industry. Some of them are, from a light manufacturing that got built up next to that. And they're all in this, like I said, they're all in the same block. And we've got this great space that's right next to a former railway line that has now been turned into the West Orange Trail here in Orange County. And there's just, thousands of people a day on a weekend will pass by. And so it's got a real rural feel, but we're only a half mile from the downtown area with all the,
Yeah.
little shops and restaurants and things like that. And so we're not out in some industrial park, and we're not way out in the sticks either. We're kind of in this kind of small downtown area. We're, adjacent to it. And we've got all these beautiful established oak trees, and we've got a lot of green space on our property, which is what attracted us to the property in the first place. And now we're starting to, kind of lean into that agricultural history and do some farming on it as well, and be part of the makerspace. So Makers Hollow is, the kind of the best way we could kind of encapsulate of how do we put in the name, who and what we are, that, we're making things, and we're also a little whimsical and kind of country and small town, small town kind of a space.
So we can talk more about the individual members, but you do have some members that are there using this as their full-time shop or part-time shop, right? And
Yes.
so that exists now, and I'm sure every time we record another episode, it'll be a different situation of
It
who's
most
there
likely
and
will
who's
change,
around. But
and the nature that we set up was that it would allow for that flexibility of change, because that's the other thing. A lot of spaces out there, if you wanted to rent a shop, you'd have to, probably sign a year lease, and we know that that just doesn't work for artists. That's kind of too intensive a commitment for a lot of people, especially if they're trying to step up their game out of their garage or out of their kitchen table, or even out of a larger space, and kind of maybe downsize and adjust with the changing market like we're dealing with right now, where the whole system has been totally upended with the pandemic and the lockdown, and people that had plans have to rethink those plans. We
right.
certainly have had to rethink our plans as a business, because we build stuff for the film and entertainment industry, and there is no film and entertainment industry right now.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that is filmed is airing, and we have some of the things we worked on last year that are going to be airing, but there's nothing new being filmed for the most part right now, except for a few odd projects here and there.
Yeah.
So we've got nothing going on as far as the normal kind of film and theme park industry goes, and a lot of the people that are colleagues of ours and peers of ours are going through that same kind of uncertainty. So we set up Makers Hollow so that way we could have the ability for people to do long-term renting, short-term renting that are project-based, and then also to have memberships where they kind of have access to a more broad set of resources and use of the space. So most of the people that have used our space, we started out with just renters to kind of get a feel for this, and we've had a couple come through. We had a machinist, we've had various different kinds of fabricators, a carpentry, cabinetry company, and they all used us as a stepping stone to build to what their next iteration was going to be. Several of them have used us to rent some space, get established, figure out their kind of system of how they're going to work, and then they expanded to a larger space. And one of them was a machinist that came from working out of a makerspace, the nonprofit makerspace, outgrew that, rented space with us for a time, and then now has like a 4,000 plus square foot shop, and is building parts that are going up into space, with the NASA
Oh, wow.
programs that are going on right now. And that's awesome. And he wanted to rent more space from us, and we were like, that would be awesome. We would love to, have you continue to be here, but you've kind of leveled up. And if we rent out that as much space as you need, then we wouldn't be able to keep, the focus on the small little
Keep
niche,
incubating.
you know,
Yeah.
incubating for space for other artists. And so we don't like to rent typically more than 1,000 square feet per individual over the long term, because we want to keep make best use of that finite space that we've got. When there are so many resources out there, if you want to rent 2,000 to 4,000 to 10,000 square feet, there are plenty of places that have that kind of space in and around the Orange County, Central Florida area. There's a lot of options. But if you want to rent 1,000 square feet, maybe even something as small as 200 square feet, which some of our smaller renters do, there's just no
No,
option.
those small
You've got to
rentals
work
just
out of your
really,
garage.
they basically don't exist.
They
So
don't
it's a
exist.
really
I
great
don't know of any
opportunity
options.
for your community to have that.
And like I said, makerspaces, by the nature of their nonprofit, they really have to keep their resources available to their members to make sure it's, kind of equally available and used by everybody. So they really can't allow for people to take a project or a business that started out, then maybe they incubated in the early stages of, testing out some designs and things in a makerspace. But once it becomes their regular kind of frequent fabrication or even a full-time gig, they kind of have to discourage that, because then you're going to start using up the resources, maybe overutilizing the laser cutter or the CNC machine, or just leaving a mess in the space because you're always working on a project. And it's like, where do you go? I mean, it's great that you got to get out of your garage and into that maker space, but now where do you go from there? So we want to be a stepping stone. Makers Hollow can be where you can go as an artist and a maker to build to something different.
Well,
One of our renters previously, he rented almost 1,000 square feet of space and got out of his garage, and then did that for a little over a year and realized that what would really work best for him would be to collapse everything down. He donated some of his tools to our space when he left, and he collapsed down into a trailer that he could park outside of his house, and then he could take it around to client jobs, because he was doing cabinetry and carpentry. So several of our people have already moved up and out and gone bigger, and we've had some that have gone smaller, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to create a space that allows you to find the best fit for your business without the extra burden. And right now we've got about half a dozen renters and members that all do various different things. We've got people doing furniture refinishing. We've got a pottery sculptor that's doing her firing here. We've got a metal fabricator. We've got a local arts organization that's storing some of their art exhibits in our space, and they built them in our space. And then when they were done, they now store them in our space. And so we've got a kind of a range of painters and fabricators. We've got a WDI project manager, and he uses it more for his own personal projects, where some of the rest of these people are all using it for their professional endeavors. Some of them that are full-time, some of them
well,
that are
and
part-time.
one thing that I think is interesting is that you yourself, even though you're part of this, community that you're sort of fostering of these little, creative businesses or individuals, you also still, volunteer at other maker spaces, or you'll go and use their tools and their setup. So it's a non-competitive environment, right?
Absolutely,
Maker
absolutely.
spaces is not a
We are
zero
just
sum
another
game.
resource. Well, I mean, Orlando, it started out, it had one maker space, and then it has two maker spaces, and now it's got three independent maker spaces, in addition to the Melrose Center, which is in the Central Library, which is an amazing space. And they all have their own character and flavor, based on different things like the resources they have available and the community that's centered around them, the people that started the organization. So, we've got FamiLab up in northern Orange County, or actually, I guess they're not even Orange County, but northern Central Florida, and they've got a little biohacker space.
Right.
And then you've got, Maker Effects, which is now got their BattleBots arena, and they host the Maker Faire Orlando every year. And then you've got Factor, which has a little bit of kind of what we have going on, where they rent space to people that do this as a business every day, in addition to their maker space. So every kind of space has a different structures, a different flavor to what kind of tools and projects they've got available. And so it's kind of non-competitive, because if you live in South, Central Florida, you really don't want to drive all the way up to, Longwood through traffic and everything like that.
Yeah.
So the best thing about makerspaces is to have them be more available, regionally. They're each going to have different flavors based on the area, based on the people that live in that area, and based on interests. Maybe it would be interesting, if you're really into bio, hacking and playing around with CRISPR and all those sort of things, to to drive the longwood if you're into that, because it's probably not something that I'm going to add anytime soon. But if you're into a lot of different kind of projects and you like to come to Makers Hollow, but doing that CRISPR biohacking and playing around with that is something, if we get enough members, then it becomes worthwhile. Then we could set up a space, but it's not an interest that I'm into, so it's not something that I'm going to look to add anytime soon.
It would be a similar thing if like, somebody was really into, in my world, like into woodworking, and then they decide they wanted to get into welding. Like, it's not something you can just do in 5 minutes. Like, you have to have like people who understand the safety of it and some of the tools, and there's a certain kind of space that you need, and maybe different, ventilation. So like starting a new practice, some things easier than others,
Yeah.
Some investments bigger than others. So like you said,
and that's why, with our space, we've got this agricultural history to our properties. So now we've started the farming, and no other maker space has got farming, because they're all in industrial parks.
Right.
Every single one of them's in an industrial park with no green space whatsoever. They're in asphalt jungles. We're out here with all of our, grass and green space and trees. So now, we're starting this big farming project. We're going to have our chicken coop. We've got a little vermicomposting. We've got composting bins. We've got a little blueberry grove going. We're doing vegetables. We've got, the standard stuff, tomatoes and peppers and peas. And we've now added some fruit trees and things like that in addition to the blueberry, grove. And, the property has a history of that, and it's got the space for that. We're also, because of the space that we have and because of the interest that I have and other people have in our area, we're working on setting up a blacksmith shop, and we're going to keep kitting that out more and more and more. And that's just not something you can do in an industrial warehouse, because like you said, you need, space, you need ventilation, you need access to certain tools and resources. And we've got the metal fab. And so, the blacksmithing is a natural sort of, expansion of what we can do here already. So these are the kind of things that are great about having more maker spaces that aren't necessarily competitive. They can each kind of find their own flavor and their own character, and they can support each other. We love the other maker spaces here in Orlando, and I hang out with all of them. I've visited every single one. I'm an off and on again member of Maker Effects down in South Orlando, just because they have different tools and resources, and the community. Again, it all comes down to this, community. And so the more connected all these maker spaces are, the more that everybody's resources kind of become, more useful, more efficiently applied to everyone.
So for this introductory episode, I think a good way to close it out is just going to be to tell people where to go to get more information. You're very active on Instagram, I know for sure.
I'm working on that. Yep, you can. We're Makers Hollow across the board, on everything, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon. You can follow us on Makers Hollow on Patreon if you want to come and see more about, how you can help Makers Hollow grow and support more artists and benefit the local community in a larger way, and the maker movement in an international way, because we're very supportive of the larger maker movement throughout the country and the world.
And if you're watching this as a video, then and you like, audio podcasts, check your favorite podcast directory, SoundCloud, iTunes, etc. We're setting
definitely
those
subscribe.
Up. As we record this, it doesn't really exist yet, but this is episode 1. So once you have an episode, then you can get listed. It's kind of one of those
episode Alpha 1. It's episode Alpha 1.
Right, yeah. Episode 0, as we would say in the programming world.
And then, even though I do have makershollow.com, it does not exist in a significant format at this time, but we're working on the website. We kind of had to feel out how we would structure all this and how it worked into the space in our lives. And now it's kind of grown some legs, and it's time to level up the whole thing. And we were always just letting artists and makers find us through the natural kind of conversations and connections, and people that knew who we were, needed us, would find us. And now we're ready to kind of start branching out, letting people know more about what we do.
Very cool. Well, Stefan Price, Thank you
Ryan Price.
for joining this interactive conversation that we have here so far. Can you call it a podcast when there's only one? I don't know. I don't know.
It's a start. It's a start.
It's a beginning. You have to walk before you can run. You have to sketch before you can paint. All of
Right.
those good analogies happening here. So here
So
we go.
you gotta alpha podcast before you can podcast.
One in the can. And this
Excellent.
first time that I've ever done this sort of like live format with, like we say, the big lower thirds down here. But
Got the banner.
yeah,
So like I said, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all the socials, Makers Hollow.
we'll work on this
Like and
banner
subscribe.
area down here for future episodes too. So we got more coming, but we had to start somewhere.
Excellent. Well, we'll
All
look
right.
forward to the next one.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe, click the like button, etc., etc., and we'll see
All
you
the things.
soon.